تيست شغال ولا ايه؟ تقرب. طب ماشي، تحت امرك يا مدير. تحت يا مدير، تحت. يا باشا اتأكدت المعلومة؟
Hello, we are going to be starting in few minutes. If anyone needs headsets for translation, please, you should collect them at the back. We cannot distribute them. You have to collect yourself personally. Please proceed to collect them at the back. Thank you.
Okay, so do you have a jack for this one?
That one no.
No.
انا ما عنديش اي مانع.
بس مفيش جاكس عند حضرتك تاني.
ما هو لسه الكاميرا اللي وضع حضرتك برضه نفس الوضع.
Okay.
Because this guy is gonna film the whole thing.
لو معاك بقى مايك ممكن تحطه على الكاميرا بتاعتك وقرب الكاميرا قدام شويه.
He's suggesting that perhaps you can use an external mic and place your camera wherever you like.
وممكن يحطها جنب اي سماعه عشان يبقى الصوت قريب منه.
And these are the speakers. These are the speakers over there.
Okay.
So you may stand there.
I'm just gonna film next to
بس
that.
ما تحطش جنب السبيكر الاولاني ده.
Perfect.
Just get this one. Just get this one, and you can. تاني واحد تبقى معايا.
ماشي، او الثلاثه اللي هناك براحتك.
So either the three over there,
Okay.
or the first two from the stage.
This one is broke.
Yes.
Okay. So
ده فاصل.
The two there are working?
دول شغالين او الاثنين.
Okay, perfect. Shukran. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dalia.
خلاص طب place your tripod there.
Hello, everyone. Can I ask all of you to be taking your seats? Because we are about to start. Thank you so much. Fantastic. Okay. Please, a reminder to anyone who will need headsets and translation to take them now. Some of the speakers will speak in French, others in English, and we have one person, one of our youngest delegates, who will speak in Arabic. That's very, very good. Okay. 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 I will wait for a few seconds so everybody can get their logistics organized. Okay. Okay. Okay, let's start. Okay, welcome everyone to this very special event. On behalf of UNICEF, I would like to welcome you to this event with a very clear title, From the Frontlines, Adaptation to Protect African Children and Youth. My name is Paloma Escudero, and I am UNICEF Head of Delegation for COP27. Today is all about connecting the African governments leading the negotiations at COP with the young African advocates here advocating for African and young children at COP. We cannot be more grateful for all of you to be spending tonight at very late in the middle of the negotiations of COP these 90 minutes with us to understand how what we are discussing at COP all these 2 weeks is going to have a real impact on the million of children in Africa who are at the moment so severely impacted by climate change. We have a luxury panel with us. We are going to have with us as our keynote speaker the chair of the African Negotiators and the Honorable Collins Sovu, Minister of Green Economy and Environment for Zambia, will start our event today, but before him, we will have the newest UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador, Vanessa Nakate, addressing all of you. After that, we will have a panel discussion between 3 of our African youth advocates and 2 high-level representatives from the governments of Malawi and Zimbabwe. And after the discussion, we will have an intervention and a closing by the co-organizer of this event, the University of the United Nations, together with the Youth Envoy for the COP27 for Africa. So I will then now, with no further ado, give the floor to Vanessa Nakate. I don't think you need an introduction, Vanessa, but I can say you have been an extraordinary activist champion for climate in Africa, and now UNICEF is privileged to count you as part of our family as our Goodwill Ambassador. Vanessa, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to tell you the story of my journey in September in Turkana in the north of Kenya. This region is in the grip of the deadliest drought in 40 years, and as a result, almost a third of its children now suffer from acute malnutrition. I will never forget the story of a child I met in a hospital in Lodwar. Lodwar is the capital of Turkana County and the place where UNICEF treats the very worst cases of severe acute malnutrition. This condition is sometimes called wasting because that is what happens to the children who suffer from it. They are quite literally wasting away before your eyes. This child's family was not able to get the help they needed in time, and when the sun set on the same day I had met him, he died. This is the reality of the climate crisis in the Horn of Africa. Droughts that cause famine, heat waves that cause death, floods, fires, and storms. These crises disproportionately affect children who are the least responsible for the climate crisis on a continent that is responsible for less than 4% of global historic emissions. Sometimes I want to get angry, and I do, but at the same time, I know that we have the solutions to these challenges. They come from all over the world. but it is African countries, especially their young people, who are overflowing with answers. The greatest way we can tap in this drought is in the intelligence and the talent of young Africans who are taking the future into their own hands. If nations cut their emissions immediately, we can still prevent the very worst cases of the climate crisis. But sadly, some consequences are now inevitable. This is why governments must invest in resilience and adaptation. This is why they must put children and young people at the heart of their decision-making, and why the services that children rely on, such as hospitals and schools, must be made climate safe today. I saw this kind of intervention in Turkana, how solar-powered boreholes are providing safe water, and how clinics have been made ready for climate shocks. And I met a mother in Turkana called Dorcas, whose child Milka did make it to the hospital on time. He received the treatment he needed, and thanks to that, baby Milka is still with us today. In Uganda, I am leading the Vash Green Schools initiative to bring solar power and efficient cookstoves to schools in rural communities. This helps children to study when it's dark and eat meals from stoves that do not pollute the air they breathe. A recent report from the Malala Foundation has found that the closing gender gaps in education can help countries better adapt to the effects of climate change and decrease the rate and impact of global warming. The report found that when girls go to school, they learn the skills to overcome climate-related shocks, like the critical thinking capabilities needed to process and also act on the risk of weather reports. Countries that have invested in girls' education have suffered far fewer deaths from droughts and floods than countries with lower levels of girls' education. The actions we take now will determine the fate of millions of children across the world, or rather the fate of every child alive today and every child yet to be born. I invite all of you to take notes, because the governments, young people, and the leaders you'll hear from today have the adaptation answers you are looking for, the answers that will secure not only their future, but yours, our future. Now it's my pleasure to welcome one such a leader to speak. Like me, she's a young African woman who has been bringing her message to her peers. And like me, she loves poetry, arts, and crafts. Unlike me, however, she is a child. And though I am young, I think she can speak to the experiences of children in Africa better than anyone in this room. Would you please join me in welcoming from Tripoli in Libya, an artist, advocate, and aspiring astronaut, Revan. Thank you.
اسمي ريفان أحمد، وقبل ما تسألوني عمري 12 سنة، وعلى باب دخول المرحلة الإعدادية. هذا علاش توا مش وقت نومي. طبعا المشكلة إنك تكون ناشط صغير في موضوع التغير المناخي، طبيعي إنك تكون فاهم المشاكل اللي تواجه فيها العالم، لكن أنت في نفس الوقت مش كبير لدرجة إنه ياخذوا نصائحك بجدية. طبعا لأن الشاب الصغير ما يقدرش يصوت وما عنداش مصانع ولا شركات ولا يملك فلوس. طبعا على الرغم إن معظم الناس في الظاهر تشجع وتصفق لنا، لكن في نفس الوقت تجاهلنا سهل جدا. وطبعا هذا الشيء يتضاعف إذا كان شاب أفريقي، لأن معظم قمم العالم يجاهلوا فيها الأطفال الأفريقيين أو الشباب الأفريقيين، وهذا الشيء باش مساعدنا إن نوصل صوتنا. طبعا أنا جيتكم من ليبيا مدينة طرابلس، أكيد سمعتوا بها ولا شفتوا صورها الجميلة، لأنها تعتبر من أقدم وأعرق المدن في العالم. طبعا هي على الرغم من مناخها المعتدل وموقعها الجغرافي ومواردها الطبيعية، إلا أنها تعتبر أنها قاعدين احنا نلاحظوا في تغيرات أعلاها، كأنها قاعدة تقول لنا إنها خلاص ما عندها طاقة تتحمل، وإن التغيير لازم يبدأ بسرعة. طبعا أنا سعيدة إني موجودة في الكوب، لأن كل ما نشوف طفل أو يافع أنا نفرح، لأن نحس إن في أطفال تانيين قاعدين يفكروا في اللي نفكر فيه، يعني موضوع التغير المناخي، وإن نقدروا نوقفوا مع بعض ونساعدوا بعض. طبعا زي ما قالت لكم فينيسا إن أنا نبي نكون رائدة فضاء. الناس تقول لي علاش بتطلعي من الكرة الأرضية؟ لا، أنا مش نبي نطلع من الكرة الأرضية، نبي نقرأ على العلوم، ونبي مثلا لما نطلع نشوف الكوكب الأرض من برا أخضر من اللي توا أكيد هو عليه. وطبعا نبي نختتم إني نشكركم لحضوركم جلستنا، وإن شاء الله تكونوا استفدتوا منها حاجة تقدروا تروحوا بها لبلادكم. وشكرا.
Wow, what a start. Ravan, you will be an astronaut or anything else you want to be. So with the dreams, with the hopes, with the drive of African young people, we have started this event, and now it is truly a pleasure to be asking the chair of the African Negotiators for COP27 to be joining us, the Honorable Collins Nsovu, Minister of Green Economy and Environment for Zambia. Thanks.
Good evening. Madam Paloma, and I must say I'm more confident to speak now because I'm seated next to Honorable Ndua Mukaka, the Minister from Malawi, and Ambassador Faranis. The reason is simple. As we speak for Africa, there will be evidence of the other African countries. So it's not a Zambian position, but the African position. I'm also motivated to speak about this subject, listening to the two great youths, Vanessa and Raven. They ably articulated why they should be at the center of any decisions we politicians make. This is key. Additionally, the two youths are female. In Africa, where I come from, the youths, and in particular the girl child, is heavily affected by the negative effects of climate change. The youths go to draw water for their families. Because of climate change, the water sources are getting further and further away. The girl child is easily married off in Africa. The girl child is vulnerable. The girl child helps the family gather that food. So to see you, the young ones, the female ones, the girls speaking at this event is gratifying because you are speaking to issues which you experience. This is key. I wish, therefore, to thank UNICEF for extending the invitation to Zambia as the chairperson of the African Group of Negotiators to participate in this very important event. Allow me, as I said before, to express my gratitude to the child speakers, Vanessa, who I met a few years back and who has been really flying the flag for the youths. Congratulations, madam. And also Revan, who has articulated her interesting and inspiring climate change position and experience. As African governments, we care for our children, and Raven and Vanessa's story is yet another reminder that we need to do more for our children to adapt to climate change. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, adaptation remains the #1 priority for Africa as adverse climate events such as floods and droughts are becoming frequent and annual in occurrences in many countries across the African continent. In the same vein, children from various African countries are among the most affected by the impacts of climate change due to their high level of vulnerability and low adaptive capacity. This is compounded by the children's involvement in subsistence farming, which is hugely impacted by the reduced rainfall and production, as well as their involvement in drawing water, in food collection, because now water supply points are becoming stressed, which now is making them walk very long distances. This reduces the time that children have to be in school. These are just but a few examples on how climate change is negatively impacting our children. Therefore, our position as African governments has been the development of actionable adaptation policies and on securing the necessary financing for the implementation of these policies. We realize that as governments, we are the driving force for the formulation and implementation of climate policies that can address the unique needs of our country's youngest citizens. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we also need to have a paradigm shift and involve the youth in policy formulation, since this is the generation we are planning for beyond ourselves today. Excellencies, we are all aware that children and the youths constitute over 50% of Africa's population. They are the silent majority. Therefore, as leaders representing a silent majority, we need to integrate the needs and priorities of children and young people into actionable and financed policies and plans. This is the more reason why children and youth should be involved in policy development and other decision-making processes on climate change. For this reason, we remain focused on developing child and youth-friendly national long-term adaptation plans and strategies to ensure that they are financed and executed. It is also part of the reason we continue to appeal to the developed world to honor the 100 billion pledge, the 100 billion per annum climate finance pledge. I think this is key, and we are very actively pursuing this matter. We are also glad to note that the issues of loss and damage, the issues obviously of doubling on adaptation finance are issues which the global community here is taking seriously. As African governments, how will we build the adaptive capacity of our children and the youth to the adverse impacts of climate change? Well, we will ensure that we strengthen child-critical social services such as education, energy, disaster risk preparedness, food security and nutrition, health, information systems, water, sanitation, and social protection, especially in countries where children and young people are most at risk. Excellencies, these issues are a matter of development. In my country, Zambia, and in many other countries like Malawi and Zimbabwe, we are promoting free education. This is because we believe that education is the best equalizer. And we believe that uneducated person will speak to these issues in a better way. So children, you are guaranteed free education, and we are encouraging this across the length and breadth of Africa. Excellencies, while reducing emissions and pollution is the only long-term solution for our generation and generations to follow, we should not be late in protecting our most vulnerable children and young people. As African group of negotiators, we are advocating, among others, for the respect and consideration of children and young people in the implementation of the Paris Agreement at all levels of governance. We are also ensuring the participation of our children and the youth as key stakeholders and implementers in countries' national climate adaptation and mitigation measures, including the national determined contributions and the national adaptation plans. We've also initiated a program for youths and other juniors as negotiators in climate change issues. Excellencies, investing in children's and young people's needs, rights, participation, and action benefits all of society. Investing in building the adaptive capacity of our children and the youth to the impacts of climate change will therefore always be our priority. We will make sure that all children and young people can go to school, that they are physically and mentally healthy, that they are protected at home and in the community, that they are skilled for future work and can participate in decisions that affect them. Children and young people are safer when they are prepared for and have overall reduced risk for disasters, and when their environment is free from toxins and pollutants that affect them. This, as Zambia, this as Malawi, as Zimbabwe, this as the rest of the African continent, is our commitment. And as chair of the African Group of Negotiators, this is a stand we will actively support. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your kind attention.
Minister Nsubu, thank you so much for your passion, for your commitment to child rights, and for having the African children at the heart of the negotiations of all the African countries. Thank you so much. Now we are going to move to the panel discussion, so perhaps I can ask the different panelists to be moving to the stage. Let me introduce the Honorable Eisenhower Duwam Kaka, Minister of Natural Resources and Climate Change for the Republic of Malawi. Please, a round of applause. Let me introduce Ambassador Rafael Tallerera Faranisi, Permanent Secretary, the Ministry of Environment, Climate, Tourism and Hospitality Industry in Zimbabwe. Thank you so much. Eric and Yuguna. Eric, that's it. Eric, a round of applause. So, Eric, he's 20 years old and comes from Kenya, and he co-leads Kenya's National Fridays for Future group. Thank you, Eric. Then we also have with us Ketsia Pasu. Ketsia, please, to the floor. She is 18 years old, comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and she has been a UNICEF youth advocate since 2021 and launched the campaign called Bopeto Nakelasi, which means cleanliness at a school in her country, giving and promoting the importance of recycling. And finally, please, to the stage, Christabel Clotilda Miribidi. She is 23 years old from Zimbabwe, and she's here with the Yango delegation. She belongs to the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association Youth Network, and in October 22, she qualified for the global finals of the NASA Space Apps Challenge. Very, very impressive. Thank you so much. So, all of you, government representatives, youth delegates, youth advocates, most of you have been here now for nearly a week, following very closely negotiations, discussions. I hope also we have been following progress, we have been following challenges. This is the moment to really be exchanging views of what the outcomes of COP27 could mean for the young African that are really looking at us here at COP to make sure that after COP27, they really are going to be protected, they are going to be prepared to live in an Africa that no doubt has been changed by climate change. So, let me start by Malawi. What do you think that the current negotiations now at COP can mean for the young people in Malawi?
Thank you very much. What do the negotiations at COP27 mean to the children of Malawi? I think let me begin answering that question by saying that as a policymaker, my interest is not just to see to it that children have a voice. My interest is to see to it that the voice of the children is also heard. Because it is one thing for the children to have a voice, it is another thing for the children's voice to be heard. So, what it means to the children of Malawi, in as far as the negotiations at COP27 are concerned, is that their interests, their perspectives will be incorporated into the final position, which takes into consideration all the needs and interests of different interest groups. So, the long and short of it, children's interests, children's perspectives, in as far as climate change is concerned, will be taken on board at COP27. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Ambassador, the same question for the children, young people, Zimbabwe. What would you like to be bringing back home?
Thank you very much. Speaking after my minister from Malawi here, I don't know what else we had. The difference is that he's a policy maker, I'm an implementer. So I would align myself with exactly what he has said, but more importantly, what we want to take home for our youth is something tangible, something they will be able to relate with, something that they will say it was worthwhile for the government and also the youth from Zimbabwe. We have a fairly large contingent, I think about 20 or so, to say we went, we had the experience, and we got what we wanted. So in terms of issues at hand on the table, we would want to see practical measures being taken to address the current challenges they face, as well as taking advantage of opportunities that will emerge. And obviously taking into consideration that if we don't secure their future, then our future is also doomed. Thank you.
A follow-up question for both of you. How close do you think you are to bringing back home the practical decisions that will make a difference in the lives of young people? How do you think that the voices of young people, and they have been so vocal, so present during COP, have been truly heard? As we say, no decision about us without us. That's what they say. How do you think? Do you think we are close to that, or would you think that still the coming week is going to be a challenge?
Well, I do think that we are there. I wouldn't want to say we are close to that. We are there. Because I think it begins with giving the children, the young people, a platform to be heard, which is what we've done. I would take Malawi's case, for example. Just weeks before we came here, there was an inaugural children's conference on climate change. And during this conference, these children were given a platform to air out their views and their perspectives. Now, those have been incorporated in the national position paper. What it means is that what we are presenting here as a country represents the views and perspectives of those children. So yes, we are there. We are not just close there.
And we hope that Malawi example will be the role model for every country, not only in Africa, but for every country that really is going to incorporate children and young people voices in their proposals and hopefully also at the negotiation tables in the future. But thank you so much. And for Zimbabwe, what is your take at the moment? How close, how far?
Negotiations are a process. It's a process of give and take. We are still hopeful that with the time remaining, we'll be able to come up with some takeaways. Having listened to what our two very able youth spoke, it would be a tragedy if the leaders have not been listening. And if at all we fail then to listen to what they have said, then it would be a tragedy. But we are hopeful. Even if we don't manage to get what we expect, we can still go back home based on the experiences we have had so far. There will be some takeaways and action can begin when we go back home. Yes, we would want much more, but that should not stop us from implementing some of the very positive developments that have taken place since we have been here. But we are hopeful.
Thank you so much. Now we have the take, the analysis of two of the biggest champions of child rights in the negotiations. And you are very brave to be here. But let's hear perhaps other perspectives, the perspective from the young people. Christabel, what is your take about what are you expecting of these negotiations? What would you like to be bringing back home?
Okay. We're here and we want to come out from this place with solutions. So what I'm expecting is that by the time that we go back home, we are going to be having something that is tangible, something that we're going to present even to our youth back home, that this is what we went for COP to discuss about, and this is what we managed to come up with. Because we cannot postpone childhood, we cannot postpone youthfulness. This is the only chance that we have to be young people, and we really need to make things happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christabel. And Ketsia, what would you think that these negotiations could mean for the young people in DRC?
Moi, ce que j'attends de ces négociations, c'est vraiment qu'il y ait un réel changement. Il y a 27 ans, il y a eu la première COP, je n'étais même pas encore née. Et maintenant, j'ai 18 ans sur Terre, mais les solutions tardent à arriver alors que les effets se font réellement sentir. Et moi, ce que j'aimerais, c'est retourner dans mon pays, en RDC, et dire aux jeunes, dire à mes petits frères, dire aux enfants, voilà, bientôt tout va changer. Au moins, en fait, cette lutte, elle aura porté ses fruits. Moi, je veux que pendant cette COP, ce que j'attends, c'est vraiment qu'il y ait des décisions concrètes et audacieuses qui soient mises en place.
Well, I think that there is a consensus that is concrete actions, concrete decisions that we can really say to the children, this concretely is going to help you to cope, to adapt, to protect you from climate change. Eric, what would you like to bring back? What do you think that success will mean for the children of Kenya?
Kenya is bearing the brunt of the climate crisis. Right now, there is an ongoing drought that is putting millions at risk of severe hunger, and people's lives are at stake. Whether or not COP27 delivers on loss and damage finance and climate finance will be the litmus test for success at COP27.
And how do you think that the discussions on loss and damage, how do you think that the discussions on adaptation plans for health services, for education, could be translated into things that young people will say, yes, we have hope. We see that the world is taking climate change and the impact in our lives seriously. What type of actions would you like to be approved, or at least you would like to see support from in this COP?
Kenya is bearing the brunt of the climate crisis, and there is lack of finance to support communities who are bearing the brunt of it, despite having the least role in causing it. At COP27, we hope that global North leaders commit to the creation of a separate loss and damage finance facility to support communities who are going through this drought. Because it reaches a point where we can no longer adapt to the impacts of the climate crisis, and they end up creating loss and damage. And that is why at COP27, global South countries, civil society have come together to demand for the creation of a separate loss and damage finance facility. And this is a position that children and young people from the African continent have been championing at this space, because this is what climate justice would mean for the African COP.
Thank you so much. What do you think, Ketsia, that if you could think about, we are now discussing adaptation plans that could really benefit, no? The social services, the coping mechanism for children and young people in Africa. What will be for you the most important services, plans, programs that could really make a difference in the life of children in DRC?
La translation était un peu plus difficile, mais ce que moi j'attends en termes d'adaptation, c'est vraiment qu'il y ait une prise de conscience des autorités et que l'information sur les dangers auxquels on fera face et l'information sur comment on pourra faire face à ces dangers soit distribuée ou soit attribuée aux enfants dès le bas âge. Ce que j'attends vraiment comme plan d'adaptation, c'est que vraiment au niveau des pays africains, l'éducation climatique, la préparation à faire face à cette crise soit accessible à tous les enfants de tous les pays d'Afrique, marginalisés ou pas en fait. Il ne faut pas qu'on donne cette éducation seulement aux enfants qui sont directement victimes, mais même ceux qui ne sont pas encore victimes du changement climatique, dans leur communauté, doivent se préparer à l'avance parce que le changement, il est là. Et la seule chose qu'on puisse faire maintenant, c'est de nous adapter en fait.
No. Extremely important, Ketsia. If I have been discussing and talking to, I think, my goodness, more than 50, 60 youth advocates here, how many of you are devoted to be raising awareness about climate change among the children of your countries? How many of you are really engaged on climate education programs? And I think that at this COP, the greening education, the awareness raising, I think has been really present. Yesterday, I participated in an event with UNESCO when we launched a new partnership and initiative to be inviting all governments to truly be investing on green education. Something like that perhaps could be one of these very specific, concrete progress and advances that we could bring. Christabel, what do you think will be those things that really you would say, when I go back home, I can see hope that I can bring home with a specific initiative that really can make a change?
So, the specific initiative that I think would make a change when we go back home is to raise awareness. I believe education is the most powerful weapon that we can use to change the world, quoted by Nelson Mandela. So we really need to raise awareness on the climate crisis, we really need to reach out to the young people, to the elderly, because climate change has no boundaries. It's actually affecting everyone on planet Earth, be it the young, be it the elderly, be it the youths. It's actually affecting everyone, and its impacts are actually devastating. So when we educate the community, when we educate the young people, when we educate the children, then that means that they're empowered, because education is empowerment, and therefore they will be in a position to take on initiatives, different initiatives that are aimed at fighting the climate crisis. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. And Revan, I hope you can understand me. Yesterday, we were having a discussion, and Revan said very clearly that climate education, we don't need only to go to the schools, to have big TV programs, radio programs. It starts with us talking to our best friend, and our best friend talking to the best friends. It's how to invite the young people to really be talking about climate and be educating parents, grandparents, politicians, and others. So, how the hopeful message and the engagement of the young Africans on really making a difference and transforming the understanding, the culture, the awareness of climate change in Africa, how that can help you as governments, how that can help you to be really making the climate adaptation plans a priority in everything that you want to do for climate in the continent. How do you think that this engagement of youth is going to help you to be doing your job? Yeah? Free flow.
You see, we are in a global crisis. And that is the first step to taking concrete decisions and actions on climate change. And what needs to be understood is that in the fight against climate change, we need not leave anyone behind. So we are involving the youth, we are involving men and women, we are involving children. Everyone at every level must be involved. Now, involving the youth at this stage helps us as policymakers to make sure that the decisions that we make, the policies that we make, do reflect the needs and interests of the young ones. So it is very important that we as policymakers do engage with the youth to make sure that whatever policies we make should incorporate the needs and aspirations of the youth in as far as climate change fight is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador?
Well, maybe let me preface my remarks by stating the following, that as part of our national development plan and as part of government policy, in whatever we do, we have mainstreamed youth into all programs. And we have even now reached a point where there are youth quotas in all decision-making processes. Even our parliament, although I would not know whether the young parliamentarians would really be youth, but even at that stage, we've gotten to that level. Over and above that, we have what we call a junior parliament of Zimbabwe. There's a child president. And it's representatives of all our provinces, right? And starting this year, we have mainstreamed climate issues into our budgets. The budget call circular that was issued by government this year mandates, obligates all ministries and departments to mainstream climate. And in that, even every ministry department is required to have a youth representative who will address those issues. And even in our delegation here, we have, from my own ministry, a youth representative. So this discussion will help us even further go back home, further evaluate the policies we have put in place, and to interrogate them to say, what we have experienced here in terms of challenges and opportunities that we are facing, how can we then input that at the national level? For example, we have a policy framework, and we've been assisted by UNICEF to to come up with a climate learning policy for the young people, and it has been translated into all our languages to make sure that we do not leave any place and any child behind. So these conversations will help us to go back home. Even if we have not made the kind of progress we would want, still it's a good learning curve that will assist us further refine our policies and be more practical in terms of addressing the expectations of our youth. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I know that in many of the African delegations, there are not only youth delegates, also they are highly integral to the decision making, and they are really influential in the negotiation tables. It is a minority. Hopefully by COP28, that will be the norm, not the exception. And I think that that's a model that Africa can really teach other delegations to do. But this is the moment. You have this opportunity to really be sending the final message of what will be, for you, success or failure at the end of this COP for African young people and children. Eric, what will be for you success or failure in COP?
African children and young people are bearing the brunt of the climate crisis despite having the least role in causing it. Around 1 billion children, almost half of the world's 2.2 billion children, are at severe risk of being impacted by the climate crisis, according to a UNICEF report. And African children are disproportionately bearing the brunt of this crisis. But despite being victims of this crisis, they're also showing leadership and taking action to they're also taking action and creating solutions in terms of adaptation. Across the African continent, children and young people are demanding for climate finance from global North leaders to support adaptation and mitigation. They're holding, here at COP27 specifically, African youth are demanding for global North leaders to meet the $100 billion climate finance commitment that was made during the signing of the Paris Agreement. This commitment is nowhere being met. At the same time, it is a priority for African children and young people for African governments to prioritize creating child-sensitive adaptation approaches that put children at the heart of adaptation, because they're disproportionately bearing the brunt of the climate crisis and need support to come out of this crisis stronger. Children and young people specifically are also creating solutions when it comes to health systems, in terms of decarbonizing health systems, but also creating resilient health systems that deliver for children and young people in need of support. As droughts and famines ravage the African continent, African children and young people are working to create resilient food systems and localized food systems that meet the food demands of their local communities where food is needed the most. As the climate crisis wreaks havoc and the children and young people bear the brunt of the climate crisis, we also recognize that it reaches a point where we cannot adapt to the climate crisis, and we need loss and damage finance to support communities who are bearing the brunt of the climate crisis. I want to highlight that the creation of a loss and damage finance facility and global north countries meeting these commitments is their moral responsibility because they had the largest role in causing the climate crisis and need to support communities from the African continent who had the least role in causing it, because Africa is only responsible for 4% of global historical emissions, but is bearing the brunt of it. The worst impacts of the climate crisis are being faced on the African continent, and global north countries have the moral responsibility to pay for loss and damage finance and climate finance to be delivered in grant form instead of debt creating forms, so that they support in adaptation and mitigation and also loss and damage finance. Whether COP27 delivers on climate finance, meeting the $100 billion per year commitment, and the creation of a loss and damage finance facility is a prerequisite for climate justice for this African COP. Whether or not it is an African COP will be seen by whether or not it delivers climate justice for African people, and climate justice also means finance for communities who need this at this tough times. Thank you.
Eric, crystal clear. We will know in a week. Ketsia, what for you will be failure or approval?
Selon moi, participer à cette COP a plusieurs avantages, notamment le fait de pouvoir passer le message des jeunes Africains, des enfants de mon pays, à un plus haut niveau. La RDC est considérée comme le deuxième poumon du monde après le Brésil. On a de grandes forêts, on a de grandes ressources en eau, mais malheureusement, la RDC, tous les autres pays d'Afrique, est particulièrement affectée par les effets du changement climatique. Les effets du changement climatique affectent notre mobilité, nos capacités à pouvoir nous nourrir, à pouvoir aller à l'école. Et le changement climatique n'affecte pas que les forêts, mais ça affecte notre avenir, notre devenir, nos rêves et nos capacités à bénéficier du monde dont vous avez bénéficié. Et moi, ce que j'attends vraiment, c'est que la voix des jeunes Africains soit prise en compte et soit prise au sérieux. Il faut qu'on soit vraiment placé au cœur de la stratégie de lutte contre le changement climatique lors de cette COP. Et il faut, comme on l'a dit, que tous les dommages soient payés. Payer les dommages, ce n'est pas seulement, selon moi, donner de l'argent aux États africains qui souffrent du changement climatique, mais c'est de les aider aussi à se développer tout en préservant ce qu'ils ont, tout en préservant l'avenir des jeunes générations africaines. Je pense que payer les dommages, ça revient aussi à prendre conscience de l'impact de ce que nous on pose comme action dans d'autres pays. Merci.
Well, thank you so much, Ketsia. It is a very passionate and well-explained approach to why loss and damage. It goes beyond the money. It goes really to help the development of the countries in the best, and hopefully with a human-centered, a child-centered focus. Thank you so much. Christabel, I'm going to give you the last words of the panel. What do you think will be for you success or failure for the COP?
For me, failure for the COP would be failing to mainstream our youth voices, to take them forward, because we're here, we are trying by all means to speak on behalf of the other youths who were not able to come and represent us here. But we are here so that we communicate their plight, because they're also facing this climate crisis that we are also facing. So failure would be failure to take up that, to mainstream our youth voices and take them forward. Okay, then on the part of success, success would be, or my success story would be to go and establish more environmental clubs when we go there, because I believe that we need to catch the children young. When we catch them young, then it means that as they grow older, they're going to have that inculcated in them. They're going to grow up as environmental custodians. They're going to grow up as responsible children, because I also believe that environmental child rights should also come with responsibilities. So in as much as the climate crisis is a crisis, it's also coming with responsibilities that are also on the part of the children. Then also, I would also want to commend Zimbabwe for introducing in the curriculum climate change. You realize that these grade 7s who wrote the examinations, grade 7 is like the primary grade, they actually had to write on how they participated in cleanup campaigns, because our Excellency President Emerson Mnangagwa, he declared the first Friday of every month as the National Cleanup Day. So it's something that is being observed across the nation, and it's something that everyone is participating in. So it is something that we should also be taken on board. I'm also encouraging other countries here to also take that up, because it's something that will help us to ensure that our children will grow up as better custodians for the environment, and they will be responsible citizens. And also to add on, is the idea that the grade 7 people, I was talking about the grade 7 peoples, right? They wrote their examinations, and it had the composition part had a component of the tree planting initiatives and the cleanup campaigns. So yeah, those would be my success stories, that it is something that we should all consider to take on board, because we really need to catch them young so that they will be the future that we want them to be. Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you so much. So our take is that we are in the middle of the Africa COP, that very strong, clear, young African voices have expressed what they consider is going to be vital for them in this COP. And as important as it's going to be, of course, to get concrete time-bound commitments on financing for adaptation plans, clear advance on loss and damage facilities, is going to be to make sure that the voices of young people, their experience, their proposals, everything they are doing for good to make better and greener their own lives in Africa is taken well into account. And I think that Africa is in good hands with the negotiators we have here today representing, that are listening to young people and more are engaging with them and incorporating them in the negotiations. Good luck in the coming days, because millions and millions of Africa, half of the Africa population, depends on the decisions that will be taken in COP in Sharm el-Sheikh in the coming days. Thank you, everyone. I say goodbye to the amazing panel, and then we continue with the rest of the program. So I am now introducing the co-host of this event and the moderator of the rest of the event, Dr. Eric Tambo, Head of Pan-African Cooperation and Educational Technologies at the United Nations University. Dr. Tambo, please take the stage.
Many thanks for this great introduction, also these great panels. I think we had a lot of inspiring solutions and recommendations, mostly provided by youth, but also very great example of two countries championing, so how youth could be better integrated in policy. So as the co-moderator has announced, it's a co-event, which is also hosted by the United Nations University, a sister institution of the United Nations system, which also empowered and support youth or strengthen the capacity of youth to provide solution. So, and we will have, for this second part of the presentations, two person, so one of our youth, Philippa, and another person also which is on the way. Hopefully she will be able to make it. So, but prior maybe to invite Philippa on the floors, maybe to give some 1 or 2 words on what the United Nations University is. So I think the United Nations University is part of a network of 14 universities worldwide working mostly toward the Sustainable Development Goal. And the institute in Bonn is particularly working on the issues of environment and human security. At the institute in Bonn, we have a specific section called the Pan-African Cooperation and Educational Technology, which try to address the issues of youth innovation and entrepreneurship in the climate action sectors, meaning how could we strengthen the capacity of youth of being solution provider in the complex topic of climate change. So we are doing that in many ways. One of the projects that we are currently implementing is how to integrate youth and to support their countries in the global stockage process, more from the entrepreneurial perspective. How could they be designing solutions so to support their countries to fulfill their commitment to the Paris Agreement. So, and for that we have designed and implemented a program where we had almost, I think, 40 youth that got some theoretical skills on the global stockage process, what is the monitoring, but in the same times also got entrepreneurial skills and went through a 2-month journey of developing concrete solution. So with to address more or less the issues of climate change and support their countries in the global stockage process. One of our alumni of the program is here, is Philippa. She will introduce at least introduce to you how her solution contribute to the global stockage process. So we believe also that in addressing the issues of climate change and empowering youth to provide solutions have to be done also in the early childhood, meaning in schools. We have heard here on introducing climate education in curriculum, but we think we should go beyond just introducing climate education into curriculum, also providing an environment to youth in schools to experiment climate solution, integrated in the curriculum, what we call STEM, integrating STEM in the curriculum with practical experiment which provide this youth the possibility to design concrete solutions when it's come to energy generation, when it's come to agriculture, at least to give them not only the theoretical knowledge but also the practical knowledge to develop solutions. It strengthens their leadership skills but also nurture their capacity to be later entrepreneurs. At least, as already mentioned, we are looking not only at the university level, but also in the early education. How could we strengthen the capacity of youth to be a solution provider of tomorrow? So it's a pleasure for me now to invite Philippa on the floors and to talk about her solution, so what she have developed in the context of one of the project, the Impulsor project that we have developed. So Philippa, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Philippa Hamagasu, Honorable Minister, Engineer Colin Zovu, Honorable Eshua Ndua Nkaka, Ambassador, Paloma Escudero, Head of the Division of Global Communications and Advocacy at UNICEF, my fellow young leaders, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Today, I'm here in my capacity as Climate Change Officer for Adaptation in the Ministry of Green Economy and Environment in Zambia. And I'm also here as a young leader under the United University alumni. I have been asked to share about the project that I'm working on, why it is unique and the impacts it has, and what others can learn from it. The project I'm working on looks at carbon market viability for small-scale producers in the agricultural and forestry sectors. I'll look at initiatives that can be designed to benefit small-scale holders while addressing critics of the smallholder carbon project who argue that they pose unnecessary risks to small farmers and are not worth their cost. The project will also explore arrangements of carbon initiatives to show how management innovations might lead to more successful projects and draw from these lessons to suggest policy action that would contribute to project effectiveness. Ultimately, the project's goal is to establish a tangible carbon offset scheme for the rural people of Nakate district in the eastern province of Zambia. What excites me most about working on this project is the fact that it focuses on the small-scale producers, which is actually a challenging undertaking because although voluntary carbon markets have existed for some time, they are not particularly well tailored for small-scale producers, and this climate intervention is not only economically viable, but it will prompt for policy intervention to government. I hope my fellow youths and young leaders can develop an interest in the carbon markets and develop skills and businesses around the same, which will ultimately effectively help deliver ambitious climate action in our countries. As youths, we need to develop our green skills, which are skills for sustainability related to the technical skills, knowledge, values, and attitudes, which are needed in the workforce to develop and support sustainable, social, economic, and environmental outcomes in business, industries, and the community. The identification, assessment, and creation of green skills is essential in transitioning to a low-carbon economy and being able to capitalize on all the social, environmental, and economic benefits that it brings. It is important to train and educate youths and children in the prospects and advantages of a sustainable economy, as well as the possibility it creates. Understanding the green skills and the extent to which they induce significant changes in our societies shines a spotlight on the bearers of and contributors to the future and prosperity of our world, which is us, the young people. Us, the young people, are the generation who suffer most from the current social, political, and economic crisis. And we play a critical role in how the sustainable development processes in organizations, institutions, and communities will work. If empowered and proactively focused on those matters that highly impact our lives, youths will be able to unleash their potential, act as agents of positive change and sustainable growth, and thus make their societies thrive toward development. Education training remain key components to tackle the challenges and uncertainties by committing to a sustainable economy, by learning new skills and improving their capacity to detect the opportunities of green jobs. Youths can develop a stronger entrepreneurial mindset and thus create more spaces for themselves and peers where a more sustainable future is possible. In university, I acquired a bachelor's of education in environmental education, and I can testify that this exposed me to climate education and motivated my interest in climate action, and also acquired me the green skills that I utilize today in my everyday job as a climate change officer and policymaker, as also as an innovator in the climate space. The biggest challenge remaining is to match education and skills training with the labor market and deliver results that are applicable in the present as they are oriented to the future. In this regard, the creation of an environmentally aware generation in terms of knowledge, skills, and education will highly depend on the use of digitalization. We are called the Generation Z, and that means the adoption of new technologies can help youths to adjust to the rapid change of how knowledge is distributed and shared, applied and stored. Technological transformations will also help youths to connect with other youths across borders and share knowledge, ideas, and experiences. Complementing green and digital skills together will help societies strengthen their sustainability agendas and shape the sustainable economy. Finally, it will bridge the existing skills gap among youths who feel unprepared and unsatisfied with their level of preparedness for the green and digital transformations. Green skills will help bridge the skills gap in environmental sustainability and will help maintain the balance of the environment and also contribute to the achievement of our nationally determined contributions, our national development plans, and the sustainable development goals. With those few remarks, I thank you all for your kind attention.
Many thanks, Philippa. Many thanks, Philippa, to highlighting once again the role of the educations and also green skills for youth. So how can we strengthen it? Also, digitalization is one aspect that I also get from your talk. How can we combine digitalization, green skills, and entrepreneurial mindset? I think that are three key components. When we see what the youth can do today, how they mastered digital technology to address specific challenges that they have, the innovation that we are seeing in the East Africa on mobile finances, in fintech, if we can translate these lessons learned and these best practices in the green sectors, we are pretty sure that the youth will be able also to contribute with their abilities to be innovative and digital skills to change and also to contribute to climate actions. We were supposed to have another panelist, Omnia El Haren, which is still to be stuck on another event. So, and yes, I think maybe just in a nutshell, we had already a brilliant summary of the panelists, the different contribution of the other panelists. So I think we will have just to close the event here. We are almost 8, so I think 5 or 10 minutes before the event. So I think if we stop the event here, so it will also be fine for everyone. So thank you once again for your attendance. I think I see the room is still full. It's mean the different contribution was quite interesting. So, and yes, enjoy the rest of the time at the COP. Thank you.